Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ties That Bind DFW podcast. I'm your host, Amber Monroe, and my goal is to foster unity within the community by sharing stories that inspire hope, passion, and resilience, and also spotlighting local businesses as well. In a world that seems to be so focused on social media divisiveness and not everything you see is authentic, I'm here to bring the real. The views and opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily those of myself or the Ties That Bind DFW podcast. All right, let's get going. Everyone, I am so excited and humbled and happy to introduce to you a good friend of mine, Mrs. Kirsten McCormick. We met a while back within the homeschooling community, I believe, and we just kind of connected there. And I have been following her on social media for a while now. And I kind of watched her move to Mexico and all the things that she's doing for her children right now. And I'm just so glad that she's here. And she's going to be talking today about modern parenting in the digital age. And she's going to give us some great tips kind of about how to stay centered as parents and to keep our kids grounded and not glued to screens, which I think we all can use some of that advice. Welcome, Kristen.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I raised my kids in DFW and was part of the homeschool community there for many, many years. And then about 5 years ago, we took a leap and decided to move to Mexico, which is where we've been ever since. Although I still frequently come back to DFW and visit because I have so many friends and family that still live there. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time and allowing me to come onto your podcast. I'm really honored to be here. I guess I wanted to. Oh, so I was just going to start by sharing a little bit about my parenting journey and why I enjoy talking to parents, and especially on the topic of parenting in our modern and digital age, because it comes with some really wonderful tools, but also some huge challenges for those of us who are trying to raise well-rounded, centered, grounded kids in a world that often can feel really off-center.
Yes.
So for me, the journey of trying to find this kind of balance in the digital age was started kind of during the pandemic, when a lot of our schooling and social options went online. A lot of the things that our kids usually would have met up for in person, suddenly they were meeting up online instead. And we had screen time limits before that in our family. But then suddenly kids couldn't just go outside and play with their friends because we weren't allowed to go anywhere. And so they were doing more and more gaming online, more and more talking online. And it felt like sort of a necessary thing. And I think for a lot of families, it shifted the trajectory of how much time was considered normal to spend online. And nowadays, if you look at the statistics for 2024 and 2025, the average teenager spends 7 to 8 hours a day online or in front of a screen outside of their school hours. So that's not counting whatever school they're doing. It's 7 to 8 hours a day outside. And I honestly don't think that screens are evil. I don't think that they're a bad thing. I think that they can be really amazing tools. It's great to be able to do photo editing and video editing, to use our phones and screens for music and connecting and communicating. But the tricky part is that they can also be very addictive. And 7 to 8 hours a day spent in front of screens is 7 to 8 hours a day that they are not getting out and kicking around a soccer ball or riding bikes, reading books, learning to sew, learning to play board games, or do a lot of these other things that kids need for normal, healthy development. And so I've done a lot of research. I highly recommend the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And his book is really, really good, and it goes deep into the statistics. But I've done a lot of research, and I've interviewed a lot of families about their experience. And the statistics and the research has now proven that the more time kids spend online, the higher the rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. These things are definitely preventable, but we as parents have to be really, really intentional about our family's screen time usage, about what we as parents are modeling for the kids. And so this has just made me really passionate about this topic and getting the conversation started with other parents.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that about parents kind of helping the kids to balance that screen time with, the school that they're doing. How would you guide parents as far as balancing that schoolwork that they have? Like, say they're doing, online work at home or even at school. How would you balance that, those requirements with healthy screen time limits for them?
Well, if they have schoolwork that's required for them to do online, obviously that is sort of one of those things that falls into the category of necessary. I think that having devices that are specifically for schoolwork that they cannot access other
Okay.
online activities. So, for instance, if they're doing some sort of online curriculum, making sure that either they can't access or that there's adequate supervision, because social media and gaming are such strong pulls and such huge distractions
Mm,
that work that may only take them a couple hours, if it's constantly interrupted by social media notifications and the ability to get online and play a quick game, they're not only not going to be able to focus and absorb what they're learning, but they're going to end up extending that sort of minimum necessary screen time for a
okay.
lot of hours. I mean, we all know what that's like, right? We get on
Yeah.
social media to answer a quick message, and then 45 minutes later, we're still scrolling. So we as parents, we know the struggle. Like, we're familiar with it too. And our brains are already fully developed. Imagine having a
Right.
brain that is not fully developed and does not have the same impulse control and the same frontal lobe development.
Mhm.
It's impossible for them.
This is true. Yeah, I find myself often, reminding my kids too. I'm like, yes, I do some online work, but I always tell them my brain is fully developed. I don't know how well that develops, but I'm an adult and it's different. Um, but speaking of that, you are an entrepreneur yourself, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But how would you balance that? And that question can go for me as well as any other moms or parents at home that work from home and you have an online business, you have to advertise. How would you advise us as parents as far as running our business online while still practicing what we preach about healthy screen time limits?
Yeah, that's a really, really tricky one to navigate because
Mm,
our kids are watching what we do more than they are listening to what we say.
mm,
And they are super good at picking up on incongruencies. So if we're saying, get off your device, get off of social media, stop gaming, but then they see us interrupting a family dinner or being on our phone while we're with them, then that sends this messaging of like, this device is more important. And it doesn't matter if we
mm,
say, hang on, I'm working. They're still being blocked by this
right.
device. And this this was a super um, this was a super challenging process for me to navigate. And what I finally had to do, which was really, really hard for me, is that I had to really put in boundaries and limits for myself around
Okay.
my work time to really
Mm,
protect the time I have with my kids. So
okay.
right now, I do 90% of the work I have to do during my kids' school hours. So right now, my kids are in school. We're not homeschooling anymore, mostly because I wanted them to have Spanish immersion and be able to learn the language here in Mexico. But I think
Yeah.
that this can also work while homeschooling if you have dedicated work hours, because it makes a
Okay.
big difference for me if I have my dedicated work hours that are while my kids are doing their, either while they're in school or while they're doing their independent work, that it's like my computer is open, I am sitting here working. um, that sends a different message, like, we are all doing our work. You're doing your schoolwork, I am doing my entrepreneurial work, and we're all doing our work. Where the gray area comes in is when we just are like, oh, I'm just gonna, I'm making dinner and my kids are here hanging out, but I'm just gonna respond to this work message real quick. That becomes this like
Mm,
gray area, slippery slope. And so what I did a little over a year ago is I told my kids, look, I do work online and it is a priority, but my time with you is also a priority. And so I want you guys to help me keep my work time in my work time and my family time with my family time. So if you see me on my phone when I'm with you, I want you to remind me that it's family time. And boy, did they love being given permission to do that.
I'll bet.
So if I try to keep my phone like on its charger and not on my body when I'm with my kids, I try to keep it set down like on my desk. And if I do have something important that I need to respond to, then I say, okay, I am going to go check into my work stuff. Like, will you guys give me 20 minutes to go respond to some message? And I will go to my desk. I will open up my laptop. And even if I'm doing it on my phone, that kind of signals like this is serious work time. And it reminds me too, like here I am in the space that I'm working. And it sends a message to them that I'm doing work. And it also sends a message to me, like, I don't need to just sit here and scroll on Facebook or get sucked into something else online that is it's not a higher priority. So it does allow me to like, hey guys, I just put the casserole in. I have several messages I need to respond to. In 20 minutes, I'll be back. I go to my desk, I can answer my message and stuff, rather than sitting in the kitchen and not being fully present with them and not being able to really fully concentrate. Because we as moms, we also know that we're not actually getting a lot done while we're trying to multitask with them trying to talk to us at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, we might be able to answer the message, but we're not getting good focused work done while our kids are like trying to communicate with us and while we're trying to cook. We can multitask, but it doesn't mean that it's that good, focused time. And that really, really helped me. And I am not perfect at it, but it's so much better than it was. And my kids have way better attitudes about their screen time limits. Basically, ever since I gave my kids permission to call me out and kind of set that boundary in our family, they have respected more the limit. Basically, when I put limits on myself that they could see me practicing what I preach, then they have been a lot more respectful of their screen time limits that I've put for them. And I'm not perfect at it, but it's definitely a better family dynamic because they realize it goes both ways and that I'm not having a double standard.
I really love that. And like you said, I think it's so important that kids see that they are just as or more important than the things that you've got to do on your phone or for work. Kids really do notice those things. And even if, you might be doing something that's extremely important, all they see is the phone or the computer and they're not, on that level, which is understandable. That is great advice. Thank you for those amazing nuggets because I think a lot of parents struggle with that. Also kind of segueing into another area about, children and social media. There can be a lot of problems, for boys and girls, but for young girls, how would you advise us as parents to, help our daughters, our children retain their self-esteem in this digital social media world? There's so much that goes on that can really break their spirit. How might you advise on that?
Yeah, it's hard because with young girls, social media, as soon as they're on social media, they are being set up for basically constant comparison with their friends, with influencers, even their friends. Like, they can know in their head, like logically, like their friends are only showing the best pictures or that maybe they're using filters, but subconsciously they're scrolling and seeing image after image of everyone else looking beautiful all the time, having the best time of their lives, and not necessarily showing the whole picture of reality. So my first piece of advice is to delay getting any kind of social media as long as possible. Research
What
shows
age do you say?
it's going to be individual for different families. Research, the scientists who look at brain development for girls really recommend getting it between ages of 14 and 16. They would like you to wait till after 16, but for a lot of families, they feel like 14 is more realistic because the ages of 11 to 15 are super critical. developmental periods where they're developing their sense of self-esteem. And so if you can, the further you can delay it past that critical development stage, the more chances they are to already have a good, well-rounded sense of self, rather than throwing them into what can be basically throwing them into the fire before they're even fully formed. And then when they do, once they do get social media, then really limiting the amount of time that they spend on it. My daughter's 15. She has Instagram, but she has a 45-minute time limit every day for all her social media apps combined. And so that's a maximum of 45 minutes. So it's enough that she can, because they get to a point where they start to feel like, well, everyone has it and I'm being left out. So, and it's a way that they also can communicate and, chat and set up their get-togethers and stuff. And so for us, we felt like 45 minutes, that was more than enough time to have a conversation, to set up plans for the next day, to do whatever they might need to do. But there's not going to be hours and hours of endless scrolling. Because something we have to remember too is that what they see on their social media feeds is not the same thing that we as adults see on our social media feeds. Social media, the algorithms become super, super honed in on anything that they pause and look at. And because they're at an age where they're trying to figure themselves out, how do I fit in? How do I be beautiful? How do I present myself? They are more likely to pause on image-based content than we as adults are. A lot of times, like, I find Instagram for me can be a really educational place, but that's because I've kind of programmed my algorithm by searching out and taking in that kind of content. Teenagers aren't doing that. They're looking for who looks cool, who looks pretty. And so their feeds get filled more and more and more with really image heavy stuff. And so that's something we have to remember, is that they don't need to be in front of that for hours a day. And so by limiting the time, but every family has to decide for themselves what is like. I don't think that the ages and time restrictions I put on for my family is necessarily right for everyone. My whole goal is just that parents are intentional about it, that they can decide for themselves and for their children what age they feel like. Some kids are more more mature than others. Some kids are more addiction prone than others. And so parents have to decide for themselves what is a good limit for their kids, and then just be intentional and consistent with their decision, and do a little bit of research about the critical developmental stages so that one can be intentional. And I think it's really great for them to be intentional before, those that have elementary age kids can be intentional before their kids ever get devices, because it's harder to put the cat back in the box once it's been let out.
It is. Very much. Very, very good points. I think that's so important as well. Kind of shifting gears again, we've talked a lot about, social media and the negative impacts, and, children needing to kind of get out more and do things. What are some ideas that you might have that us parents can take as far as kind of getting them away from the screens, different activities that they could do outside of screen time?
Yeah, kids thrive, their social emotional development thrives with lots and lots of screen-free, unstructured play. So sports are amazing, and anything that they can physically get out and use their bodies is amazing. But it's also really important for us to remember that they don't need to have every waking moment filled with structured activities. That is not how human beings have lived throughout history. Throughout history, healthy development has been achieved by kids having a lot of time for unstructured play, because that's when they can really use their imagination and their creativity. And so one of the healthiest things families can do, especially in their communities while their kids are still young and before they ever get screens, is develop friendships and communities where unstructured play is a normal and regular thing. And where kids have the chance to get out into their communities or their neighborhoods, and whether that's, regular days of going to the park or just having other kids over and sending them out to the backyard, and it being okay for them to get a little bit bored, because that forces them to be creative and come up with fun things to do on their own. And sometimes it does take them coming and being like, I'm bored, we don't have anything to do, we'd rather play the Xbox, being like, sorry, no, it's in your brain. Because they'll come up with fun things to do. They'll figure out how to, build a go-kart, or they might start digging a hole to get to China, or a tree fort, or start planting a garden. Like, kids are creative. They will do stuff if given the time and space to do it. But a lot of times kids these days do not ever get the opportunity to get bored enough to tap into their creative genius. And so that's really important, is not over structuring their time, and for parents to be okay with kids being bored. Boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the doorway to awesome things.
I love that. And that's true. That's very true. We do a co-op, and there's a lot of unstructured play during that time. And I've noticed a change. I very much appreciate that kind of time for my kids. And you also, if you want to share about it a bit, I know that you have a business where you do excursions for teens in Mexico and kind of helping them, disconnect with digital devices and connect in person with others. Do you want to share about that? I'm really excited to learn more.
I run adventure camps for teenagers, and they are completely unplugged and device free. Kids are welcome to bring digital cameras, but at the beginning of the adventure, we collect their phones and keep them safe for them, so that they really have a chance to unplug and kind of detox. And we do fill it up with lots of really fun stuff. We are based out of San Miguel de Allende, which is a really beautiful colonial city in the mountains in central Mexico. And we start and end our adventures here, but we travel kind of into the mountains, into some more really beautiful remote areas. And we do a lot of exploring waterfalls and caves, and we go zip lining and whitewater rafting, and we do lots and lots of fun activities. So we do volunteer work in the local communities. And the goal is just to get the kids out, active, using their bodies, and building really great connections with each other and with themselves. And we have lots and lots of testimonials from happy teenagers and happy parents. And we right now, our adventures are in Mexico, but next year we're going international. We'll have a trip to Japan. We're going to be going to Guatemala. So we have other places. And the idea is to have the kids kind of get out of their comfort zone, and learn some independence, but still within a safe, contained space, if that makes sense, so that they can start practicing independence and exploring the world, but while making good friendships and having healthy adults to kind of supervise and make sure that everybody is safe and taken care of and healthy.
That's wonderful. I love that. I love it. Like I said, I follow you on Instagram, and I'm just amazed at all that you're doing. And that looks like so much fun. How can people learn a little bit more about what you do, or your website? How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I have, for the parenting piece, people want to learn more and dive more into the research around parenting in the digital age. I have an ebook that's free for parents called Unplugged to Reconnect. And it's a digital guide for parents parenting in the digital age. And then our program is called Teen Connect Adventures, and they can find us at Teen Connect Adventures on Facebook and Instagram, or at teenconnectadventures.com. And that's where we publish all of our trips and adventures. And there's information for parents there. I have a blog as well that parents can go and read more about all these topics we've been talking about.
Excellent. And I will be linking those in, on the different formats that I'm going to post this on, so people will be able to click on it right when they take a listen and a watch.
Yeah, we're pretty easy to get to from the DFW area. We're a direct flight.
Oh,
And so when kids fly down from DFW, we pick them up at the airport, and then they are taken care of from that moment. And then sometimes parents will also fly down. We live in a really beautiful vacation destination, so we
yes.
also have parents that fly down, and they have their teen-free vacation while their kids are at
Ah,
camp. So that's something that
nice.
we've had a good handful of families do as well.
A nice twofer. No, that sounds amazing. Awesome. Well, that is wonderful. Thank you for sharing all this information with us. This is definitely a needed resource and needed tips. Speaking for myself, first and foremost. And I just want to thank you so much, Kristen, for coming on, taking time out of your schedule to talk with me and my listeners about helping, children connect in person and not so much on the screens. I definitely get that. And I just want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really passionate about sharing and communicating with parents and just getting these conversations started, because this is one of these topics that I feel is essential to the future of our children and our world, because how they develop makes all the difference in the world. But it's also so hopeful because we as parents can actually make the difference. And it's through us linking arms as parents and building community around what we know our kids need. And that's why these conversations, it's the solution to the digital challenges are parents linking arms and creating communities for our kids where they can grow up healthy.
Indeed. Very much needed. Very much needed.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Ties That Bind DFW podcast. God bless. Bye.
Bye.